Hello and welcome to Abilities in Disguise. Purpose of this interview today is to understand and appreciate the unique experiences and perspectives of individuals with disabilities. I'd like to welcome Carrie Smith, good friend of mine and special education teacher.
Hi.
She has been teaching for 10 years and she is certified in general ed birth through 6 and special ed 1 through 6. And she's a parent of a child with epilepsy and ADHD. So thank you for being here today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So we're going to get right into the discussion of teaching special education as our first topic of discussion. Can you tell me a little bit about your journey into special education? What made you go into it?
So when I first went to school to be an educator, I did not want to be an educator. I had a daycare at my house, and my whole goal was to hold the credentials so that I could eventually own a daycare center. When I started getting into the nuts and bolts of what that was going to take to become an owner of a daycare center, that was just too much paperwork, too much insurances, too much hoopla. So I decided, okay, I already am going to have this degree, so I'm just going to go into teaching. And then I actually found out that I really loved it. So I have started out, I got my general education degree in birth through 2 and 1 to 6. And then I graduated and I got my first teaching job at a Catholic school in Williamsville, and I worked there for a year, and then I had my daughter Amy and took a year off. After I had her, I left the Catholic school, and when Amy was a year old, I got a job teaching in the city of Tonawanda, and I taught general education there. I taught kindergarten and I taught preschool for 6 years, and during that time I finished my master's degree in special ed. And when I was doing my coursework and my student teaching for special ed, I realized that that was really my niche. We are going to be mostly talking about my younger daughter who has epilepsy and ADHD, but my oldest daughter also has central auditory processing, and she had an IEP as well. So I was already interested from a mom point of view in special ed and ways to help children and families make connections and understand things. So that led me to that. And when I left Tonawanda, I taught 6th, 7th, and 8th grade special ed, and then that turned into like a technology job. But now I work for the City of Niagara Falls School District, and I'm in a 5th and 6th grade ICT team, and I love that. It's special ed is my favorite thing. I would never not teach special ed at this point, and it's really helpful for me with my personal journey, but also as an educator, I feel like those kids need really solid people more.
Well, I appreciate you coming in today explaining that to everybody.
Yeah.
So the class you teach right now, what's the daily routine in there? And can you tell me about the little bit unique challenges and rewards in the classroom that you're in right now?
Sure. So right now I teach in a 5th and 6th grade, and it's an inclusion class set up. So half the day I'm in a 5th grade class, half the day I'm in a 6th grade class. I am required to teach some general ed stuff. So I teach math in 5th grade and I teach ELA in 6th grade, but I'm also the support for all of the special ed kids that are included in the class. So on top of teaching those 2 subjects and grading for the whole class, I also have to make accommodations for the special ed kids. I have to make sure I'm following all of their goals. I have to progress monitor for them. I have to pull them at different times of the day and just check their understanding for things. And I have to make sure that everything's running smoothly and have communication with the special ed parents. I have to also communicate with the general ed parents for the ELA and the math that I teach. The general ed teachers, they help me with progress monitoring when we're kind of flipped. They will walk around and guide the students and help my special ed students when I'm teaching, and they help me communicate with the families for the other subjects for the rest of the class. So it's a really unique situation teaching on an ICT team. There has to be a lot of collaboration, a lot of teamwork, a lot of communication between all of the teachers. You have to all be on the same page. But fortunately for me, I'm on a really good and really strong team with both teachers. And we also have a teacher assistant, and she kind of flips back and forth. When I'm in one room, she's in the other, and we flip back and forth. And I do have to leave her work to do to help the special ed kiddos as well. But that's kind of how an ICT class works. That's probably the most intense teaching situation for special ed, because you really have to be with strong people and you really have to collaborate and have a lot of communication, not just with your families, not just with your students, but with your co-teachers as well.
So what are some of the rewards in the classroom?
I think the rewards for me are that I get to see the kids thrive in a regular general ed setting. They aren't, pulled out like in a 811 or something, or a class where they're pulled out. That's a little more difficult. I have taught in those classes before, and those kids are just kind of not in with the general population, and that's kind of hard. So for me right now, being able to see those special ed kids being able to thrive with the regular kids and making friends and working on social skills in addition to their academics is really important to me, and I really enjoy it. And just seeing the kids grow, just seeing them meet their goals, and even seeing when they score within the realm of the general ed kids sometimes on certain tests if they understand. So that's really, I like that a lot. It's really good for me and the kids.
That sounds really special.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So for me, I had to do another part where I did a little bit of research. So for some kids, finding playmates is as simple as standing near a group and saying, "Can I play?" For many kids, however, joining groups at play isn't so easy. Sliding in and out of groups is fairly advanced for social skills. So young people don't necessarily know how to get involved in a group that's already formed. Some young people may have more difficulty than their peers developing social and emotional skills, and may struggle to connect with others. Additionally, certain students might be excluded from daily moments of fellowship and connection with peers in these types of ways, being passively excluded, where the students might not think to involve the student, actively excluded, where other students might intentionally exclude the student, or actively persecuted, where other students might bully the student through unkind words or actions and adversely impact the student emotionally and physically. For example, primary school age students often feel comfortable to following a routine and tend to sit at the same table or play with the same peers at break times, but this can mean other students are intentionally left out. This is an example of passive exclusion, and is more commonly experienced by students who find it harder to connect with others and develop friendships. Passive or unintentional exclusion can lead to young people feeling left out or excluded even when there was no malicious intent from others. Children tend to be self-oriented, insular, and can be unaware of the unspoken needs of others, including their peers. Adults, including school staff, play an important role in showing students how to perceive and respond to others' needs. It's normal for kids to get caught up in their usual groups. However, by showing benefits of including others, adults can teach young people to look out for others who feel lonely and show how to act intentional ways to help others be included. So what are some of the things you have done to help inclusion in your classroom? What have you done to address this problem?
So that is very true, all of those things that you read. And I actually experienced that a lot with my younger daughter because she has ADHD and she's very, very intense and impulsive. And she's very loving and she's very kind, but it's very difficult for her to make friends because the other kids are overwhelmed by her a lot. So they're not intentionally being mean to her, they're overwhelmed by her a lot. And I teach a lot of students that actually have those same issues. And what I do is I try to strategically make groups when I'm having kids pair up. When I'm having kids learn, I try to pick the kind kids, I try to pick the leaders, and I try to get those friendships to start being fledgling friendships and get other kids to help and understand. And then, just working with the kids with the disabilities, that just to try to teach them, I know you have big emotions, you have a little body, you have big emotions, and just always talking to them about their feelings and their emotions, checking in with them, making sure that they're okay, and also remaining calm when a situation happens in the classroom. The worst thing that you could do as a teacher is if a student is having a hard time and acting out or having a problem is to make a bigger deal about it and make the spotlight on that kid, because the other students are going to pick up on that and they're going to start thinking that that kid's weird. So the more that you can kind of regulate your emotions when dealing with a student with a problem and just try to downplay their behavior and just understand that that's not something that's in their control and they're not doing it on purpose, they're not challenging you, it's not a personal attack on you, and just kind of remove your ego as the teacher from the situation and just kind of say Susie, we just got to calm down. This is what we're doing right now. I'll talk to you in a minute, and just kind of downplay it so that the other students aren't going to pick up on that energy and kind of follow your lead if you cannot handle the student. You really need, special ed is really tricky if you're going into that field. You really need to check your ego at the door, and you really need to check your emotions, and you cannot revert to what happened when you were a child or how your parents would have handled it. You need to be the professional, and you need to protect every student in that classroom, including the special ed kids who are having a hard time, because even a little bit of you flaring up might get a general ed kid going and get them to start treating that kid a certain way. So you really, really need to be mindful at all times. And I would say that's probably one of the most stressful and trickiest things to master as a special ed teacher. But what I do is I just try to encourage, playtime and encourage good friend groups and try to just watch the kids and know my students and see the kids that I know will be kind, the kids that will be helpful. And at the same time, you don't want to straddle a general ed kid always with a difficult special ed kid, the same kid all the time. You want to try to make sure that's even because it has to be fair for everybody, not just the special ed kids.
Well, those are some great tips, and I thank you very much for those.
Yeah.
So the next thing I'm going to talk about is inclusion. So in education, inclusion means that a child with a disability spends time, most of it, not all, in general education classes with general education students. So what are some strategies that to ensure inclusion in your classroom and accessibility?
Well, like I said, that is the classroom that I teach. I'm in an inclusion class right now. So it's just making sure that the kids are all getting the same things, that you're not making it clear, that there's not clear definitions of, these are the special ed tests, these are the regular kid tests. Try not to pull them out as much. Like when you're pulling kids out in the hall, sometimes that's easier when you have to do a reading group or something, but try to make it a mix. So what I do for reading, especially, I do reading groups still in 5th and 6th grade, and I pull kids, but I mix the general ed kids and the special ed kids. Now, I am looking for specific things from each different kid, but they don't know why they're grouped in the groups that they're in. So I try not to make it obvious that I have low kids and high kids together. I try not to make it obvious that there's a difference in anything. And when I give kids their tests that are modified, I pass out all the tests at the same time. So they're not necessarily looking at each other's papers and they have different types of tests with different things, or maybe one kid will have half the questions in the test, and I let all the kids have extra time. So I just try to make it so it's not as obvious that the special ed kids are there, and I try to help all the kids the same. And just, like I said before, just making sure that you're paying attention to the personalities in your classroom and the kids in your classroom, and just making those groups and trying to forge those bonds with the kids where the ones that are having trouble making friends can try to find it a little bit easier.
That's some great stuff. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
So the next thing we're going to get into is the intersection of professional and personal life.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to be exploring some experiences raising a child with epilepsy and ADHD, and how that intersects with your work in special education. So what are some experiences you've had raising a child with epilepsy and ADHD?
So I have pretty much run the gambit. Like I said earlier, my oldest daughter also was in special ed. She had central auditory processing, and now she's graduated from high school. So I've gone through her whole career with an IEP and dealing with, the IEP meetings and the testings and all of those things. And now I'm dealing with that with my younger daughter. And I think for me as an educator, that makes me a better educator, because I don't only just understand it from the education point of view and from the college work and the theory point of view. I live with it every single day. I have to go to those meetings. I have to hear unpleasant things about my children that is not easy to hear, even though I'm an educator and I know who my children are and I know what they have and I know the things. It doesn't make it easy to hear that your child is struggling or your child's having a hard time. And I think for me, that makes me a more compassionate teacher. It makes me a better teacher for children and families that are experiencing going down this road with special ed. And I think if I could tell upcoming educators one thing to remember, these kids are these people's babies. They're their babies whether they're 5 or 15. And it's not easy to hear that your child is struggling in any way, shape, or form. And you have to remember that in everything that you do, when you're planning your lessons for these kids, when you're planning meetings, when you're thinking about what you're going to say at IEP meetings. You need to be mindful that these people live and breathe this every day, and you have it for 6 hours a day, and you have it for 9 months in a year. So you just need to be mindful that this is these people's lives, and you can't be hypercritical of how they choose to parent. It is exhausting. Even for me as an educator, it's very difficult to go home and want to work on homework with her when I've worked with my kids all day, and she wants to fight me and have a battle for every single thing. It's just not easy, even for the most educated, good parent. It's not easy. So go easy on your parents. Try not to be too judgmental on your parents. And I think you will have a better experience with having parents be involved, connected, have a better line of communication with them. I think that would be my best bit of advice for you, is that it is a difficult road, and it can be upsetting. You will have parents crying. You will have parents that are very upset, and you need to be mindful of that. And just remember that these are kids. At the end of the day, these are kids, and they're having big problems. And like I said, you gotta get your ego out of the way, because 90% of the time, they're not doing it to you on purpose. There's big reasons kids act like that. Kids don't just wake up in the morning and say, I'm gonna go to school and make my teacher have an awful day. They're not trying to be this way. They're not, if they can't help it. So I would just say that would be my biggest advice. Just go easy, go with an open mind, and be flexible. And just remember that whatever you're learning in this class right now is not the end all be all, that things can change and you have to look at every situation. So,
well, thank you for that. Very interesting. So the next thing we're going to get into is a discussion on your unique perspectives that you bring to work and your personal experiences. So I just want to read a little bit more research that I just did. As of 2018-19 school year, 14% of public school students nationwide receive special education services under the Individuals with Disabilities Act, IDA. That includes your child, so whose learning is guided by an individualized program, or IEP, which tracks her learning and her needs, outlining the services her school is legally obligated to provide in order to give her she's entitled to, free and appropriate public education with support she requires to learn in the least restrictive environment possible. The details of an IEP are hammered out at an annual IEP review. Children qualify for special education based on documented needs, which means the discussion often revolves about deficits. What's harder for the student? What don't they seem to grasp? And the crux of the matter, what specialized support do they need in order to learn? These meetings tell a story about the student through that narrative by educators. As an educator yourself, your unique perspective as a special education teacher and a parent of a child with special needs, how has this helped you in teaching? And as a parent, I think we already answered that a little bit. So let's get into your child specifically. What is harder for her in school?
Her hardest thing is her impulse control and her ability to make friends. So she desperately wants to make friends. She's 7, she's going into 3rd grade, she'll be 8 in the fall. She desperately wants to make friends, but she's very impulsive and she's very intense. So when she meets new people, she wants to go up and hug them. She does not understand personal space. We're still undergoing more testing. There might be an autism diagnosis coming down the pipe, but we still have to go through a bunch more testing this summer. But she just has a lot of issue with that. And then her emotions will take over. She'll be upset because she doesn't feel like she has friends. She's also in an 811 classroom, and she's in there with a lot of boys that are nonverbal and autistic, and they do a lot of parallel play. So she doesn't have a lot of exposure to playing with kids. Excuse me. That's one of her most difficult areas, and then it comes out in her academic areas, because then when it's time to work, she's still upset. She doesn't want to work, and her teachers a lot of times are very strict with her, and she feels that they're very mean. Sorry. And then she doesn't want to work for them and do the work, so then she falls a little bit behind academically. So it's just this vicious cycle of her social skills impacting her academic skills. So that's what we're dealing with right now with her at school.
So what's her favorite subject? Does she have a favorite subject in school?
She loves science.
She loves science. Mm-hmm. I love it. What does she struggle with to grasp as far as subjects go?
She has low memory, so her reading comprehension is low. She can read. Her reading ability and fluency is okay, but her comprehension is low. And then with her math, she understands math concepts, but she can't memorize her math facts and things like that. And so more of the rote skills, 1 + 1, 2 + 2, things like that. She has a really hard time grasping those things, but she can understand distance. She can understand height, things that are more complex she can understand, but she has trouble with those earlier tacit learning things. So that's where she's kind of struggling, because her ability level and her actual things that she knows, there's such a discrepancy there. So she gets frustrated a lot.
So what kind of specialized supports does she have in school?
So right now she gets OT, she gets PT, she gets counseling, and that's it. She doesn't get speech anymore. She used to get speech when she was younger, but she doesn't get that anymore. And she also sees a counselor outside of school every other weekend. And she is going to be going to a play group with friends this summer through her psychologist. And like I said, we're finishing up getting testing, so she's going to be getting a lot of testing done this summer. So I'm hoping that once that all comes out in the works, then it'll be open for her to get more services and get more things geared up for her as she gets older to grow into a young adult and just be more independent and be able to function better and make friends and be more social.
Well, you're doing all the right things. You're a very great mom.
You have to be an advocate, and you are going to run into parents that are advocates, and you have to understand that sometimes their emotions come out, and it's just because, like I said earlier, that's their baby, whether they're 5 or 15, it's their baby, and it's very difficult when your child's struggling. It's very difficult to see your child struggle, and it's very difficult not to be emotional and let your temper get in the way. So try not to take that personally if a parent lashes out on you either. It's just because they don't know what to do, and they're just grasping at straws, and it just can be very frustrating.
Well, good advice. Very good. Thank you very much. So the next part we're going to get into is overcoming stigma, and we're still going to be talking about your daughter at this point. There's going to be a little bit of research that I just did. I'm going to read a little bit about, and then I have some questions for you on that. So epilepsy is a common neurological condition affecting more than 70 million individuals worldwide, in people of all ages, regardless of geographical, social, or ethnic boundaries. However, drug-resistant seizures are experienced in more than 1/3 of patients, with higher rates of patients who experience psychiatric comorbidity, resulting in a lower quality of life. Patients with epilepsy, PWE, live under the assumption that at any given time, they may not be able to function normally. To be engaged in their usual daily activities such as driving, they must rely on someone to take care of them during their outgoing tasks. They may suffer loneliness, helplessness, and impaired self-esteem and self-efficacy with reduced life satisfaction. Therefore, epilepsy is often associated with psychological dysfunction in addition to somatic effects from seizures, leading to consequences linked to stigma that could influence one's special network. Has your daughter experiencing any of these stigmas at her age, or have you experienced this as well as being a parent? I know that I remember her having the first seizure and how scary that was for you.
Yeah. Epilepsy is really, really scary. It can be very difficult. Luckily, right now, her epilepsy is controlled through medication, but there are stigmas that go with it. She cannot go to a friend's house. I can't drop her off at somebody's house because I can't put that on another parent that if she has a seizure when they're there, they're going to have to call 911 and she's going to have to go to the hospital. That's way too traumatic for me to put on, like, Kim down the road while she watches my daughter. My husband and I do not get to go on dates because we do not have babysitters for her, because there's not people that are able to care for her if she has a seizure, nor for the same reason, nor would I put that on someone. Currently, we're going through getting her evaluated for Social Security to see if we can get respite services and get someone who would be more trained and available to help with things like that. But she also can't just go to like a dance class or play sports, regular sports and things. She can't do anything that's contact sports. So she can't play soccer. She can't play anything. She was going to gymnastics for a while, but when she goes to those things, I have to stay there the whole entire time, which is fine that I stay there, but also because of her impulse control, she gets very overstimulated, and it usually takes her about an hour to calm down, and that's about how long the classes are. So those are kind of fruitless for her at this point. Even just yesterday, she was told she cannot come to summer camp anymore. I signed her up for summer camp at her school, and they told me it was because they can't handle kids like this. And when I called to complain, they just backed themselves up, saying that it was because of her epilepsy, even though there was a nurse in place to handle her backup medicine. So there is definitely stigma. There's definitely school districts that try to use those excuses to not have her involved. So it's very frustrating as a parent. But like, it's very, very difficult for me as her parent to try to find friend groups for her outside of school, because like I said, I can't drop her off at someone else's house. She can't go have a sleepover at someone else's house. And so it just becomes this crazy, like we're just up against a wall because there's nothing that I can do. And then when she does hang out with kids that are, typical kids, she's super intense, and then they don't always want to hang out with her. And it's sad because she's a lovely, lovely young girl, and she's just so desperate for friends, but it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy because she wants a friend so bad, and she doesn't know how to make friends, and she doesn't know how to be around friends, and she like pushes people away. So I'm hoping with all of these things that we're going through and all these groups and things that we're trying to do that we can get her some help. But that's kind of the crux that we're in, and there is a stigma. And when I take her places, other parents do look at us, like when we go to my son's sports games, my son's in high school, other parents look at us like we're crazy, like we don't know how to control our child, and it's stressful. There's just a lot of stigma, and I don't even have it as bad as most people, so I definitely don't want to sound like I'm complaining or anything, but there is a lot of stigma, and that's why I'm just telling you, as upcoming educators, please go easy on your special ed parents, because they go through a lot that you don't even see. And sometimes that's kind of how their personality is going to come out, because it's just exhausting to have to fight for your child all the time.
Yeah, we still have that struggle today, and it's sad and unfortunate that she couldn't go to that camp that she wanted to go to.
Yeah.
Very sad for her, but she's a very wonderful young lady, and I hope someday she does get to do those things.
She will.
Yeah.
It'll just take time and finding the right place.
Yes. So another thing I'm going to talk about is
Oh, you're up here.
I'm up here.
Okay. Okay. So I would go like this. I would go 1.
Hold on. I want to say.
I would go 1, 2, 3, and then I would start.
Okay.
Then I would know.
I want to read this just in case I did.
Go sit down, Amy.
Okay. So
So I go 1, 2, 3, so I knew when to start.
okay.
Go ahead.
And so the other part I wanted to ask you is, since we were on discussion of your daughter, how do you help her in regard to educate others on her conditions and reduce the label epilepsy carries with this stigma?
I don't know that I feel that it's my job to educate other people, like lay people in the public, about epilepsy. When I meet new people that maybe go to her school, or maybe we'll go somewhere and make like a new friend or something, I just explain to them, you know, hey, if you want to have a friend group play date, like it pretty much has to be at my house, because, or I have to stay at your house. And I just try to explain them to that way. And I explain it from more of like a concern for me, that I just don't want to put that on somebody else to have to call 911 if she has a seizure. So I just explain it that way. And then, I mean, I don't feel like I have to explain to the school district about epilepsy. I mean, I feel like they should know that, and if they don't, shame on them. But
Yeah, exactly.
when I'm out in public and I'm meeting new people or possible friends for her, I do try to talk to the parents about it. I don't necessarily talk about her whole IEP or her ADHD or anything like that, but more just the epilepsy, that it just makes it tricky to have play dates. That's all.
Well, thank you for that. So the next part is we're going to be talking about advocacy and support. So parent and guardian participation in special education decision-making process is vitally important. The most important thing parents of disabled kids can do is take an active role as a member of the individual education program IEP team that determines a student's path, which you have already talked about a little bit about. So the IEP team is charged with making educational decisions for students and placement of a child in special education or gifted programs. Do you feel being an educator and a parent has given you the insight to help others and the ability to help your child the most due to your unique perspective?
Yeah, I think it helps me a lot because I know all the rules, and the school district knows that I know all of the rules. And unfortunately, this is just the way that it is. School districts try to cut corners when they can cut corners, and they don't always explain things to parents in the way that they're supposed to explain things to parents. And I've seen it now at 3 different school districts. So I have to just assume that that is the case across the board. But it's, like I said, it's very difficult to advocate for your child. And I think sometimes knowing that I know more is harder, because then I feel like then I have to argue with them more because I'm not blissfully ignorant to things. So I think it's helped, but I think it helps me in my role as a teacher that I don't try to pull the wool over parents' eyes. I try to tell them things in facts, and I try to tell them things in ways, and I explain to them too. I share often with my parents my a little bit about my situation and say, I'm living the same life. I'm in the same boat. I know it's hard to hear. I know it's difficult. But this is what's really, in my opinion, the best thing for your child. And I just try to approach them as a person and on a personal level, because it is personal and it's emotional. So when I am operating from a teacher standpoint, when I am in the IEP meetings and I am writing the reports, I try to operate from that wheelhouse that this is somebody's kid, and try to explain it to parents in ways that they understand. I don't use big words. I don't use teacher jargon. I don't, talk about test percentages and things like that a lot. I just explain it to them in real terms. Like, this is what's hard for your kid. This is what I think is the best option for your kid. This is what I think is the best avenue for them to go down. But on a mom side, it makes it more difficult because, like I said, I do know the rules and they can't pull anything over on me because I know the rules, and if I don't, I know where to go and look, and I know my rights. So that just makes it harder for me to advocate because I feel like I'm always arguing. But for my educator standpoint, I think it makes me a stronger, better, more compassionate teacher.
Yeah, I do think that navigating the IEP process is quite difficult. And knowing your rights is probably the most important thing you can do for your child.
Mm-hmm.
So the other thing I wanted to ask you is, what are some experiences you had, and how does this help others supporting children with disabilities? What kind of support do you receive with your child right now? And I think we already answered this question.
So I don't really get a lot of support personally right now with my child because she's not signed up through Social Security. That's really the only place that you would get support, is if they were classified under Social Security. So I'm in the process of seeing if she would qualify for that, mostly just because I feel that my family needs some respite, and I need her to be able to be available for more programs and have it open for more programs. Now, I will tell you that I would say a large chunk of teachers, when they get the Social Security paperwork to fill out, they're like, oh, this person just wants to get money from the state. But that's not always the case. I don't need money from the state. I wouldn't care if I didn't get a nickel from the state. I need more programs for her. I need more availability for things where she's not going to get kicked out after 1 hour and told they can't handle kids like her. I need some respite so that my husband and I can go on a date, and so that we can just have a little break from her sometimes. Love her dearly, but she's intense, and for 2 solid years, I have maybe been away from her like 7 hours, maybe, but minus when I'm at work. So it's just very difficult, and there's a lot of reasons that people file for Social Security and try to get help. It's not always because they want money from the state. So please be mindful of that, and please try not to talk about your parents like that. I know there's always people that are like that. I know there's always going to be people that try to take advantage of situations, but that's not always the case. Sometimes people are just exasperated and are just trying every avenue they can to get help with their child.
Thank you. So you said you were going for Social Security for her. What are some other resources available to parents and teachers, and some other programs that you could tell others about?
There's a lot of programs out there for a lot of kids that have a lot of things. If your child is diagnosed with autism, there is so many programs, so many things. If your child is deaf, blind, there's so many things. Buffalo Hearing and Speech, all of these places have so many things that can help. Canisius Institute, Autism Institute has a summer camp that helps kids. She actually went to it one summer, but because she's not diagnosed, she can't go to it anymore. And I feel like I am just in a unique position because my daughter doesn't exactly fall into one particular category. She kind of has a lot of different things, but only a little bit of all these different things. So she doesn't really qualify for a lot of things. So these kids like her that fall through the cracks, there aren't a lot of options for her. There aren't special camps for her to go to or special places. She doesn't qualify for BOCES. She doesn't have enough regression to go to summer school. Like, there isn't a lot of things that she qualifies for because she falls into this crazy little niche and she kind of falls through the cracks a little bit. But if students have specific things and specific diagnoses, there are a lot of programs in this area. And I think this area in general does a very good job with a lot of things for kids with special needs. So that's why I'm hoping that if I can get the Social Security piece of it, that I can open up some things for her to be able to go to and kind of get her out from falling through the cracks a little bit. Other than that, I don't think that my school district has been super helpful with helping with that, but there are programs out there, but parents have to look for them. They're not just readily available or easy. You have to really look for them and scour with them, and they change all the time.
Well, that's great advice, and I'm glad that she has had a chance to go to those camps that helped include her into things. So, So I just want to thank you at this point. I mean,
Yeah,
we're
no
wrapping
problem.
up our interview. So in today's discussion on the interview with Carrie Smith here, we did a little bit of teaching at the intersection on special education and parenting a child with epilepsy and ADHD. Carrie Smith was very helpful and able to help us understand and appreciate the unique experiences and perspectives of individuals with disabilities. So thank you again, Carrie, for
Yeah, no
joining
problem.
me today.
Anytime.
Take the time out and our discussion together on your personal experiences in special education as a teacher and as a parent with a child with special needs. And I'd like to thank you again for sharing your story. It's my hope that this will help teachers and parents alike. So thank you again.
Yeah, thanks. I hope that this helps some future educators. I know it was a lot and it was kind of heavy probably, but you need to know these things when you're going into education, and they're things that you're going to deal with every single day of your career. So good luck to all of you. We definitely need teachers. There's a shortage right now, so keep it up. And hopefully I'll see you maybe at my school someday. So
All right.
thank you.
Thank you. Bye for now. Again, my name is Mandy Sampson. Have a great week.